For 5 years, I lived in a beautiful lie, blinding myself to the shadows in my own home. I thought my only heartbreak was an empty cradle. I had no idea that the two people I trusted most in this world were already preparing my execution. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot that even the gentlest Omega will burn the world down when they have nothing left to lose. Richard and I have been married for 5 years. He is sweet, attentive, and exactly the kind of alpha any Omega would dream of spending their life with. But behind our picture-perfect life, a quiet storm was brewing. We don't have any children. We started dating way back in high school, and while Richard's love for me felt like a sanctuary, his mother's presence was a constant, suffocating shadow. To her, I wasn't a son-in-law, I was a failure. An Omega who couldn't fulfill the one duty expected of me. Every family dinner was a battlefield. She would look at my plate, then at my stomach, and let out a sharp, disappointed sigh. You only know how to eat and fill up your stomach with my son's hard-earned money. 5 years, Liam, she had hissed during her last visit, her voice cutting through me like glass. An alpha needs an heir. If you can't give Richard a son soon, I will personally find an Omega who can. Don't think your high school romance will protect you forever. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my chest ached. The doctors said nothing was physically wrong with either of us. Just keep trying, they said. But how could I keep trying when the pressure was crushing my soul? The only person who kept me sane was June. June has been my best friend since childhood. He was the one who held me when I shook with sobs, wiping away my tears. Stay positive, Liam, June would always soothe, rubbing my back with familiar warmth. You're going to be an amazing mom. Don't let that old hag get to you. It will happen when the time is right. I believed him. I trusted him with my deepest vulnerabilities. But as the months bled into one another, something shifted in our home. Richard started changing. The warm embraces turned into brief nods. He began coming home late, smell of heavy cologne and exhaustion clinging to his clothes. Too much work at the firm, baby, he would mutter, kissing my forehead before turning his back to me in bed. The distance between us grew so wide that the bed felt like an ocean. When I finally gathered the courage to confront him, begging him to tell me if he still loved me, he looked startled. Of course, Liam. I love you very much. You are my only priority right now. I felt the lie as it flowed slowly out of his mouth. The next day, a delivery driver arrived with boxes of expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and my favorite flowers. A note from Richard read, "I'm sorry for being distant. I love you." I wanted to believe the gifts were a sign of remorse. I wanted to believe my husband was just tired. But deep down, a sickening gut feeling told me that luxury is often the cheapest way to buy silence. A few weeks after the avalanche of apologetic gifts, Richard stood by the front door, adjusting his tie. He didn't look me in the eyes. "I have an emergency conference out of town, Liam," he said, pulling his suitcase closer. "I'll be gone for 3 days. Don't wait up for me." 3 days. I asked, a sudden wave of loneliness washing over me. "Can't I come with you?" "It's strictly business," he replied quickly, a bit too quickly. He gave me a hurried kiss on the cheek and walked out before I could argue. I told myself it was fine. I needed to stop being so paranoid. By the next morning, I woke up feeling terribly wrong. My body felt like it was burning from the inside out, a strange, feverish heat radiating through my veins. And then, there was a sensation in my lower abdomen, a faint, fluttering movement that sent a jolt of electricity straight to my heart. Terrified and weak, I drove myself to the hospital. My hands shook on the steering wheel as the doctor ran the scans. When she walked back into the room, she wasn't holding medicine. She was smiling. "Congratulations, Liam. You're 2 weeks pregnant. The fever is just your body adjusting to the sudden spike in hormones." I sat there, frozen. A tear slipped down my cheek, followed by a sob of pure, unadulterated joy. For years. 5 years of insults, tears, and despair, and it was finally happening. I was going to be a parent. I couldn't wait to call Richard. I wanted to hear his voice break with happiness. I wanted to throw this news in his mother's face. Leaving the hospital, the world looked brighter. I pulled out of the parking lot, my hand resting gently over my stomach. But as I stopped at a red light near a high-end cafe downtown, my eyes caught a familiar car. It was a sleek black sedan. Richard's car. My heart skipped a beat. He said he was out of town. Through the tinted glass of the passenger side I saw two figures. The light turned green but I didn't accelerate. Instead, I pulled into the lane behind them, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I followed them to a secluded park on the edge of the city. When the car parked, I pulled up a distance away, hiding behind a row of thick hedges. I watched as the doors opened. Richard stepped out, looking relaxed, completely devoid of the stress he claimed to have. And from the passenger side stepped June, my best friend. They walked hand in hand toward a bench. I watched, paralyzed, as June laughed, leaning his head against Richard's shoulder. Richard reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind June's ear, his expression filled with a softness he hadn't shown me in over a year. And then Richard leaned down and pressed a tender, lingering kiss on June's cheek. The world around me shattered into a million jagged pieces. I couldn't breathe. The air in my throat felt like liquid fire. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run over there, rip them apart, and demand to know how they could do this to me. June knew everything. He knew every tear I shed. He knew how much I suffered because of Richard's mother. He had held me while secretly sleeping with my husband. Somehow, I managed to start the engine and drive away before they saw me. The drive home was a blur. The moment I stepped into our quiet, empty house, I collapsed onto the living room floor. I cried until my throat was raw, clutching my stomach. How could they have done this to me? I whispered to the empty room. Why June out of all people? The heartbreak was beyond me. I thought of crying my eyes out at drinking alcohol to relieve myself of this betrayal, but for the sake of my innocent child, I refused to endanger his health. My child was growing inside me, a child created with a man who was currently wrapped around my best friend. As the hours passed, the crying stopped. A cold, eerie numbness began to settle over my skin. I looked at the framed wedding photo on the mantel. Richard was smiling so brightly. It was all a lie. The gifts, the working late, the sudden business trips, it was all a cover-up to spend time with June. And June's comforting words? They weren't meant to encourage me, they were meant to keep me complacent while he stole my only happiness. I picked up my phone. I had been planning to call Richard with the pregnancy news. Now, looking at his contact name, a dark realization washed over me. If I told him I was pregnant now, he would stay out of guilt. He would pretend to love me for the sake of the child, while continuing to see June in secret. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a clean break. I wouldn't let them see me break down and beg. They had made a fool out of me for God knows how long. It was time to return the favor. When Richard texted me that night, "Just arrived at the hotel, missing you," I stared at the screen with a dead expression. I typed back, "Missing you too. Take care of yourself." The game had begun. When Richard returned 3 days later, I was waiting for him at the door with a smile. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to claw his face, but I kept my expressions carefully schooled. "Welcome home, honey," I said, leaning in to hug him. I inhaled deeply, and there it was, the faint scent of June's cherry blossom scent mixed with Richard's cedarwood pheromones. It made me want to gag, but I pulled away with a radiant smile. "You look happy," Richard noted, looking slightly caught off guard by my warmth. "Of course I am. I missed you, that's all," I lied smoothly. "How was the conference?" "Productive. Just exhausting," he said, stretching his arms. "I'm going to take a shower." While the water ran in the bathroom, I walked over to his suitcase. My hands didn't shake anymore. I opened the front pocket and found exactly what I was looking for. A receipt from a luxury boutique hotel in the city. The date matched the last 3 days. He hadn't bought any new clothes, so it felt suspicious. He had definitely bought them for June. I took a picture of the receipt with my phone and put it back exactly as I found it. The next day, I invited June over for lunch. I needed to see how far his hypocrisy went. When June arrived, he hugged me tightly. "Liam, I missed you. How have you been? Any news from the doctor?" I looked at his face, searching for a shred of guilt, but there was none. He looked perfectly innocent. Nothing new, I said, pouring him a cup of tea. Still trying. Richard's mother is putting on the pressure again. She threatened to replace me last week. June squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with false sympathy. Don't listen to her, Liam. Richard loves you. He would never look at anyone else. You just need to focus on yourself. I stared at our joined hands. He would never look at anyone else. The audacity was breathtaking. You're right, June, I murmured, taking a sip of my tea. Richard is a good man. I don't know what I would do if I ever lost him, or you. June smiled, completely unaware of the venom hidden behind my words. You'll never lose me, Liam. I'm your best friend forever. Forever, I thought. Let's see how long your forever lasts. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life, carefully documenting everything. I didn't tell a single soul about my pregnancy. I wore looser clothes to hide the slight changes in my body, and I managed my morning sickness in absolute secrecy, waking up before Richard to throw up quietly in the guest bathroom. I began tracking Richard's phone records through our shared account. Every late night at the office aligned perfectly with a flurry of texts and calls to June. I even hired a private investigator using cash I had slowly withdrawn from my personal savings account. I didn't want a single paper trail leading back to me. Within a week, the investigator sent me a digital file. It contained dozens of high-definition photographs. Richard and June holding hands at a restaurant. Richard kissing June in the back of a taxi. June entering Richard's private office after hours. Looking at the photos, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The initial heartbreak had hardened into something cold, sharp, and unbreakable. They thought I was the weak, submissive Omega who would crumble if I found out. They thought they were geniuses playing a foolproof game, but soon I am going to show them who the real boss is. On Friday evening, Richard's mother called a family meeting at her estate. When we arrived, she didn't even wait for us to sit down before unleashing her venom. I've set up an appointment with a fertility specialist in the capital next week, she announced, glaring at me. If this one turns out empty too, Liam, I expect you to sign the divorce papers willingly. My son will not waste his prime years on a barren womb. Richard sat next to me, keeping his eyes on his lap. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just let his mother humiliate me, knowing damn well that he was sleeping with my best friend behind my back. I understand, Mother, I said, my voice meek, playing the role of the broken victim perfectly. I'll do whatever is best for Richard. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Richard shift uncomfortably. Perfect. Let him feel a flicker of guilt. It would make his fall all the end more satisfying. The timing had to be perfect. The annual anniversary for Richard's family company was coming up in 2 weeks. It was the biggest event of the year, attended by all of the city's high society, business partners, and of course Richard's elitist mother. June was also invited as my +1, given our long-standing friendship. It was the perfect stage. I spent the days leading up to the gala finalizing my arrangements. I met with a prominent divorce lawyer, presenting him with the mountain of evidence I had gathered, the hotel receipts, the hidden phone logs, and the private investigator's photos. This is airtight, Mr. Vance, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. In an Omegaverse jurisdiction, infidelity with proof of emotional distress means you can claim 80% of his personal assets, including the house and a significant portion of his company shares. Moreover, you said you were pregnant with his child. Are you ready to file the divorce? Not yet, I replied, a calm smile gracing my lips. I want the papers finalized, but I will choose the exact moment to serve him. I want him to receive them when he has absolutely nowhere to hide. Meanwhile, I kept up the facade at home. I baked Richard's favorite meals. I acted like the doting, worried spouse. I even text June regularly, asking for advice on how to win Richard back, baiting him into feeding me more lies. Just give him space, Liam, June texted back one afternoon. Alphas get stressed easily. Don't crowd him. I stared at the screen. At that exact moment, my investigator had sent a live update. Richard and June were currently at a jewelry boutique. Richard was buying a diamond bracelet. The day before the gala, I felt another prominent flutter in my stomach. I placed my hand over it. Just a little longer, little one, I whispered, We are going to free ourselves from this toxic cage. And your father will pay for every single tear we shed. The night of the gala arrived. The grand ballroom was opulent, filled with crystal chandeliers, expensive champagne, and the city's elite. Richard looked dashing in his tailored tuxedo, his alpha aura commanding respect. His mother stood near the entrance, preening like a queen, greeting investors. June arrived shortly after us, wearing a stunning outfit that seemed a bit too flashy for a mere guest. On his wrist, catching the light perfectly, was the diamond bracelet Richard had bought. "Liam, you look beautiful," June gushed, hugging me from behind. "Thank you, June. You look radiant too." "That's a beautiful bracelet," I remarked, staring directly at it. June flinched slightly, covering it with his sleeve. "All this? Just a cheap trinket I bought myself." "Is that so?" I smiled, turning to Richard. "Doesn't it look lovely, honey?" Richard cleared his throat, his face turning pale. Yes, it's very nice. Excuse me, I need to speak with some board members." I watched him walk away with his guilty conscience. As the night went on, the main event approached. Richard was scheduled to give a speech thanking the investors and celebrating the company's success. Behind the podium was a massive projector screen meant to show a slideshow of the company's history and milestones over the years. Before Richard took the stage, I slipped away to the tech booth. The young technician looked up, surprised. "Hi, I'm Richard's husband," I said, handing him a flash drive. "Richard asked me to give you this. It's an updated version of the anniversary presentation. He wants it played as soon as he steps up to the mic." "Oh, of course, Mr. Vance," the technician said, swapping out the drives without a second thought. I walked back into the ballroom and took my seat at the front table, right next to June and Richard's mother. Richard walked up to the podium, the crowd applauding loudly. He looked confident, powerful, and utterly untouchable. "Thank you everyone for coming tonight," Richard began, his deep voice echoing through the speakers. 4 years ago when I took over this company, I had a vision. Right on cue, the projector screen behind him flickered to life. But it wasn't a picture of the company headquarters. It was a crystal-clear, high-definition photograph of Richard and June kissing passionately in the back of a car. The ballroom fell into a dead, suffocating silence. Richard kept speaking for another 3 seconds before he noticed the gasps and whispers breaking out across the room. He turned around and the blood completely drained from his face. The screen transitioned. The next slide showed the hotel receipt with both of their names, followed by a compilation of texts where June mocked my inability to conceive, calling me useless, while Richard agreed. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard's mother shrieked, standing up, her face turning a violent shade of red. June looked like he was about to faint. He stared at the screen, then at me, his lips trembling. "Liam, I can explain, it's not what it looks like," he pleaded. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up gracefully, smoothing down my suit. I walked up to the stage, the eyes of every single powerful investor and socialite in the city burning into me. I handed Richard a thick, white envelope. "These are divorce papers, Richard." My voice carried perfectly through his open microphone. "Since you and June are so fond of sharing everything, you can share the news that I am taking 80% of your assets. And your precious company? I own enough shares now to ensure your mother is removed from the board by tomorrow morning." Richard grabbed my arm, his voice desperate, cracking under the pressure. "Liam, please. We can talk about this. I made a mistake, I love you." I coldly slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me, you liar," I yelled. I turned to June, who was weeping in his seat as people pointed and whispered at him, his reputation completely ruined in high society. "You wanted to ruin my marriage, June? You can have him. But he's a bit broke now." Finally, I looked at Richard's mother, who was clutching her chest in pure horror. "Oh, and one last thing," I said, a beautiful, victorious smile breaking across my face as I rested my hand on my stomach. "The doctors were right. There was nothing wrong with me. I'm 4 weeks pregnant. But don't worry, my child will never know the disgrace of having a father like Richard, or a grandmother like you." The entire room erupted into chaos. Security scrambled, cameras flashed, and Richard fell to his knees on the stage, begging for forgiveness that would never come. I turned my back on them, walking down the aisle with my head held high. For 5 years, I had lived in a cage of doubt and sorrow. But tonight, I walked out into the crisp night air, completely free, ready to build a beautiful life for me and my baby. The night of the gala was the last time I ever set foot in that mansion. I packed my belongings into a few suitcases while my phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat of my car. It was Richard. Over and over, his name lit up the screen like a dying star. I didn't answer. I watched the battery drain from 10% to 5 until finally the screen went black. The silence that followed was the first breath of fresh air I had taken in 4 years. With a significant portion of the divorce settlement safely in my bank account, I moved into a quiet, modest house downtown. It was small, far away from the glitz and judgment of high society, and it was perfect. Within weeks, I used part of the funds to open a small boutique bookstore and cafe. For the first time in my life, I was building something that belonged entirely to me. My business began to thrive, and as the weeks bled into months, my belly grew rounder. Life was finally peaceful. But peace is a fragile thing when you are dealing with a desperate man. One afternoon, I was at the local supermarket buying baby clothes, running my fingers over a tiny blue onesie, when a shadow fell over me. I turned around and my heart dropped. It was Richard. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, and his eyes bloodshot. Before I could even speak, the proud, arrogant alpha dropped to his knees right there on the supermarket floor. Tears streamed down his face as he grabbed the hem of my coat. "Liam, please forgive me," he sobbed, oblivious to the gasps of the shoppers around us. I was blind. June was the one who seduced me. He set a trap for me, Liam. I never wanted to hurt you. Please come home. Let me be a husband to you again. A sickening wave of anger rushed through my veins. The sheer audacity of blaming the man he willingly slept with made my blood boil. Without a second thought, I raised my hand and slapped Richard across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the aisle. "Don't you dare blame him for your choices," I hissed, my voice trembling with cold rage. "You are the one who broke our vows. Never show your face in front of me again." I didn't wait for him to get up. I grabbed my bags, walked out of the supermarket, and drove home, my heart pounding against my ribs. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I was safe. I had no idea that a far darker storm was brewing in the shadows. By my 7th month, my baby boy was kicking constantly, a beautiful reminder of why I was fighting so hard. One evening, after closing up the cafe, I was driving home along a dark, winding road. The streetlights were sparse and the night was eerie. Suddenly, a blinding pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Before I could react, a massive truck rammed into the back of my car with terrifying force. The impact sent my vehicle spinning out of control. The tires screeched, and with a sickening crunch of metal, my car slammed violently into a massive oak tree. The airbag deployed, blinding me with white dust, and then, darkness. I woke up a few minutes later, coughing, my vision blurred. I couldn't move my legs. The dashboard had crushed down upon them. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, but my protective instincts kept me awake. Through the shattered window, I heard footsteps on the gravel. A man's heavy voice echoed through the dark as he made a phone call. "Yeah. It's done," the man spoke coldly into his phone. "We hit him hard. He's not getting out of this one without a fracture." My heart stopped. This wasn't a mere accident. As the footsteps retreated and a car sped away, terror gave me a sudden surge of adrenaline. My baby. I had to save my baby. Gritting my teeth against the agonizing pain in my chest and legs, I reached for the jam door handle. I pulled with all my might, screaming out in pain until the metal finally gave way and the door swung open. I dragged myself out onto the cold asphalt. That's when I saw it, thick crimson blood pooling around my thighs, staining my clothes. No. Please God, no. I wept, frantically pulling out my phone with trembling, bloody fingers. I dialed the emergency services, my voice a desperate whisper. "Please help me. I'm pregnant. I've been in a crash." For 20 agonizing minutes, I lay alone on that dark road, clutching my stomach, watching my life slip away onto the pavement. By the time the distant wail of the siren reached my ears, my vision was fading into pitch black. When I opened my eyes, the harsh, white lights of the hospital emergency room blinded me. Doctors and nurses were sprinting alongside my gurney, shouting medical jargon over my head. His blood pressure is dropping rapidly. The fetal heart rate is decelerating. We're losing the baby. Panic seized my chest. Save him. I screamed, choking on my own tears as they wheeled me into the operating theater. Please don't let him die. I will give you anything, just save my son. A nurse pressed a mask over my face, telling me to breathe. I wept bitterly until the anesthesia dragged me under. When I finally woke up hours later in a quiet recovery room, the dull ache in my abdomen told me everything. The emergency C-section was over. A pediatric doctor walked in, his face grim. Liam, your son was born prematurely. He is stable for now, but his lungs are underdeveloped, and he has lost a critical amount of blood from the trauma of the crash. I broke down, the tears burning my face. I spent the next 24 hours exhausting my savings, paying for the best specialists, advanced incubators, and every piece of medical technology available to keep my little boy alive. I hadn't even healed from my own major surgery. Every movement felt like knives tearing through my skin, but I didn't care. On the second night, the doctor called me into the neonatal unit, looking desperate. Liam, your son's condition is deteriorating. He needs an immediate blood transfusion. Your blood type doesn't match his, and our blood bank is short on his specific rare alpha type. We need the biological father. You have to call him. My heart froze. What for? I whispered, my voice laced with bitter irony. He doesn't have a father. If we don't get a matching transfusion within the hour, your baby might not make it through the night, the doctor said softly. A cold, agonizing reality washed over me. After everything I did to protect my child from that toxic family, my baby was at risk of leaving this world forever. I sat in a wheelchair, staring at my tiny son through the glass of the incubator, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. I swallowed my pride, pulled out my phone, and dialed the number I thought I'd never call again. After the fifth agonizing ring, Richard finally picked up. Liam? Oh my God, Liam, is that you? Shut up and listen to me carefully, I interrupted, my voice dead and dripping with ice. Your son is at risk of dying. The only way you will ever begin to pay for the crimes you committed against me is if you get to the City Central Hospital in the next 10 minutes to save his life. If you don't, nothing else can be done. Richard didn't even ask questions. He demanded the address and hung up. While I waited, I wheeled myself closer to the incubator. My baby boy looked so small, wrapped in tubes, his tiny hands twitching. I pressed my palm against the glass, crying my eyes out. They are going to pay for this, my love, I whispered, a dark promise settling in my heart. Whoever did this to us, I will destroy them. The nurses begged me to go back to bed, warning me that my own C-section stitches could tear, but I couldn't feel physical pain anymore. The emotional agony numbed everything. I dragged myself out of the wheelchair and sat directly on the cold floor next to the incubator, weeping silently into my hands. Suddenly the doors flew open. Richard ran in, drenched in sweat, panting heavily. The moment he saw me on the floor, he rushed over. I didn't have the strength to be angry. I reached out, grabbing the fabric of his trousers, lifting my tear-stained face to his. Please, I begged, my voice breaking. Please save our child. Don't let him die, Richard. A tear slipped down Richard's cheek as he looked at me, then at the tiny baby in the glass box. He knelt down and gently gripped my shoulders. I will do anything, Liam. I swear to you, I will make sure our son lives. The medical team rushed Richard into the donor room. For an hour, I waited in agonizing suspense. Then the doctors began the emergency transfusion. It felt like an eternity, but suddenly, a sound cut through the quiet room, a faint, sharp cry. My baby boy cried out for the very first time. His lungs were working. He was stable. Relief washed over me so intensely that I lost control of my actions. In a moment of pure, unadulterated excitement and gratitude, I threw my arms around Richard, sobbing against his chest. Richard held me tightly, his own chest heaving with emotion. But within seconds, reality snapped back into focus. The scent of cedarwood hit my nose, and I remembered who he was. I violently pulled away from his embrace, stepping back. "Don't get the wrong idea," I said, my voice turning to stone. "This is all your fault." Richard looked hurt, confused. "Liam, what are you talking about?" "The crash wasn't an accident," I hissed, glaring into his eyes. "Someone attacked us. A truck intentionally rammed my car from behind and forced me into a tree. I heard them on the phone saying the job was done. Someone wanted my baby and me dead, Richard." A terrifying alpha aura flared around Richard, his eyes darkening with a rage I had never seen before. He clenched his fists until his knuckles popped. "Whoever dared to harm my child and you, they have made themselves my worst enemy. I will find them, Liam. And I will personally destroy them." Weeks later, the day finally came for us to be discharged. To my surprise, Richard had completely transformed. He stepped in as a caretaker, refusing to leave our side. He bought a house close to my bookstore, cooked all our meals, cleaned, and stayed up during the grueling night hours to watch over the baby so I could rest. He was trying to be the perfect alpha, the perfect father. But one evening, as he handed me a bowl of soup, I looked him dead in the eyes. "Richard, stop," I said quietly. "No matter what you do, no matter how much you cook or clean or apologize, things can never go back to the way they were. The man I loved died the moment he kissed June on that park bench." Richard lowered his head, a heavy silence falling over the room. "I know," he choked out. I want to make it up to you. I am going to give you the privilege to be a father to our son," I continued, my voice firm and uncompromising. "You saved his life and he deserves to know his father. But you will never see me as your husband again. Not after everything." Richard swallowed hard, nodding slowly as a tear fell into his lap. "I understand, Liam. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me." A few days later, the police investigation was finalized and Richard brought me the reports. The truth was monstrous. The masterminds behind the hit job were none other than Richard's own mother and June. Driven by bitter jealousy and a twisted desire to get me out of the picture permanently, they had hired the men to orchestrate the crash. Richard didn't show them an ounce of mercy. He used all his power, money, and influence to ensure that the hitmen, June, and his own mother were handed the maximum possible sentences in a high-security prison. They would spend the rest of their miserable lives behind bars, facing severe, unyielding punishment. A year flew by. The pain of the past had faded into a dull scar, replaced by the joy of watching my boy grow. One sunny afternoon, I was sitting in the living room of my downtown house when the front door opened. Richard walked in, holding the hand of a chubby-cheeked, bright-eyed one-year-old boy. "Mummy?" Robert squealed, breaking free from Richard's grip and waddling over to me as fast as his little legs could carry him. I let out a soft laugh, lifting him into my arms and burying my face in his sweet neck, kissing his forehead. "Hello, my big boy. Did you have fun at the park with Daddy?" Robert nodded happily, but then he looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Mummy, why doesn't Daddy stay with us in our house? Why does he have to leave every night?" A poignant sadness gripped my heart at the question. I looked up and saw Richard standing by the doorway, looking at us with a bittersweet, longing smile. He knew his place. He knew the boundary. I looked back down at my son, running a gentle hand through his soft hair, and forced a warm, reassuring smile. "When you grow up, Robert, you will understand," I whispered softly, ensuring my voice carried across the room. "Family isn't just about flesh and blood. It's about the people who choose to do the right thing,